we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. And so just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
This is a CBS News special report.
Dan Rather reporting for CBS News from New York. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was shot to death by an assassin late today as he stood on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King had planned to lead another civil rights march in Memphis next Monday. We got the latest on the story now from Russ Hodge, news director of WREC-TV.
Years later, guys, what have we learned? What have we learned since the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., who was assassinated on this day, April 4th, 1968? I must add also, this is not just Dr. King's, the anniversary of his passing. This is also the anniversary of the passing of the congressman, I think one of our truly greatest congressmen that we've ever produced, in Adam Clayton Powell Sr., who was a pastor and also an activist. I'm sorry, Adam Clayton Powell Jr., excuse me, an activist, a pastor who fought hard to actually get tangibles for his people. And interesting enough, of course, both Adam Clayton Powell and Dr. King were both Alpha Phi Alphas, the fraternity of Judge Joe Brown and Thurgood Marshall, and so many others, including Roland. But I digress. I'm not going to make it that type of show tonight. So what have we learned since the passing of one Martin Luther King Jr.? What have we learned since when we heard the news of his passing and then the riots broke out afterwards? I had the opportunity to know and be blessed to speak with Dick Gregory. And I actually, and maybe I didn't think of uploading this now, but one day, probably soon, I would like to upload one of the interviews that I did with him over the phone with you all. It was audio recording. And both he and my father and myself, we all talked. I talked for him for well over 2 hours. And I thoroughly enjoyed it. He had me laughing and breaking down information when we talked about Hurricane Katrina. We talked about Dr. King in particular, Malcolm X, comedy, a whole bunch of things. In particular, what was interesting too, when I did my interview with Dick Gregory, it was on April 4th, 2007. And the first thing he said was, how could I forget that day? Most of you all, I want to know what you all were doing, those who are a little older than me, because I'm in my 30s, to tell me what you guys remember. Bishop Scott, hello, Bishop, my friend. Hope you're doing well. Tell us what you guys were doing when you heard the news, because Dr. King was killed, my understanding, that evening. I believe it was sometime on a Tuesday evening. Some people have said my aunt was telling me they let them out of school, but if it was after in the evening time, she would have been out of school already. Probably didn't let them back in school the next day afterwards because there were riots going on around the country. In New Orleans in particular, my parents talked about how they had, my mother in particular talked about how they had to hang black flags and black towels outside the house. My grandfather doing that for one of his cousins just to make sure that his house wasn't burned down, although they lived in the lower ninth ward, so that was the black part of town. They weren't going to really touch that. But you know, Dick described what he saw, and he was in Los Angeles at that time. When you have what's called flashbulb memory, you don't forget things like that. Just like I remember being 14 years old, about 14, actually 15 years old, really, when the Twin Towers fell. I was in school that day, and I never forget when we got out of homeroom, and we were headed to our first class. Somebody ran in and said, "The World Trade Center's been bombed. The World Trade Center's been bombed." Well, we know necessarily it hadn't been bombed. What we saw at first was the airplane crashing in the building. Now, of course, subsequently, the things about 9/11 that I have heard, just like with the Kennedy assassination, there's a lot of doubt in that. But nevertheless, I wasn't thinking about that at the time. Like most Americans, I think weren't. Your eyes were fixed on the planes crashing into the buildings. I remember where I was with Katrina, being 19 years old, and my family being in Dallas, Texas, and we were told that New Orleans dodged a bullet that Monday. I remember when we left New Orleans Sunday morning, early Sunday morning, to get out of harm's way. The state had along with I believe the state of Mississippi, they agreed to do a contraflow ban where all traffic was diverted from going into New Orleans, all lanes, especially on the I-12 and I-55, you were headed either you were headed in north direction, or you were headed in a west direction. You did not get out. You could not come into the city at all. If you were coming from the I-10, and I-12, those go east and west. Everything had to go westward, or everything was going northbound. So that I remember. And I remember where I was when I was sitting down when we first heard that the waters had broke. It was around Tuesday morning. This was after the storm had passed. So I'm bringing all of that up because we're talking about Martin Luther King 53 years later. This is a special edition of Random Topics with Gavin Richard Presents. And without that being said, guys, we're going to get started and we will talk about Dr. King in a little bit and his legacy, and also the things that we continue to go through today and the truth behind his death. You know, I've been blessed to know both Judge Joe Brown and Dick Gregory. And Dick, of course, I'll have a little bit more to tell you with regards to Dick and Dr. King, because he has even said, Dr. King was killed in a conspiracy. And I'm going to give you guys some homework to do that you can look this all up. We're going to get into it. I don't expect it to be a long short, but we will just at least get to the goods of what's going on with regards to Dr. King's assassination, what truly happened. And I'm speaking with those who have been here on the platform. Those of you who are a little older, if you could tell me, Bishop, if you don't mind, if you could tell us exactly where you were when Dr. King was assassinated. You said you were 17 years old. I just want to know what was the reaction, or where were you all when it happened, what you were doing exactly, if you all remember anything like that. This is Gavin Richard Presents on channel G-Boot 2786. Let us begin. Double.
that burst onto the national scene a half century ago in a very infamous way. Well, now, this place at the National Civil Rights Museum really is a place of healing.
Bullet knocked him against the door at 306 where he was staying. I was staying in 305.
Reverend Jesse Jackson approaches the balcony on which Dr. Martin Luther King was shot 50 years ago. Jackson was at the Lorraine Motel on that fateful day.
That if you have courage to die once, a coward dies 1,000 deaths. Every time you're afraid. We just didn't believe in that. We're all prepared to go to jail or to die.
The emotion running through visitors to the sacred site is part of the draw of being here. But for some 50 MLK pilgrims from Jackson's Rainbow Push Coalition who took an overnight bus from Chicago and arrived early this morning, it is a journey of honor.
I still hold him as my hero. Dr. King was my hero.
The Chicagoans are joined by admirers of MLK's philosophy of nonviolent protest for equality from all over.
King's probably been one of the most influential mentors in my life, even if I've never met him, and kind of redefining what it means to be engaged in the public good and be a Christian. And I'm a pastor in California.
Let me stop
so
that.
This is kind
Stop
of
this. I actually have. Hold on a
Those were
second. I
some
wasn't
of
trying
the
to.
last words.
Now, this is now the National Civil Rights Museum up in Memphis, Tennessee, since Dr. King's assassination. I actually had the opportunity to visit there myself some years back. When I was a teenager, we all went to to Memphis, Tennessee via bus. I had to have been a teenager. I remember going there. They still have the room. I don't know if they showed it in this in the video, but they still had the room where he was staying at the Lorraine Motel, sealed off. There are a lot of people who have called into question. I know some local activists, when you get there, that sit there that have called into question about the National Civil Rights Museum, certain things about it in regards to Dr. King's assassination and how they
people
handled it,
understand that he was
essentially
helping
trying
us.
to cover up his death.
So the message is getting through, hopefully, to the next generation. You can see people are gathered here. It's just going to get busier as every hour ticks by.
All right. So this was, yeah. So Bishop Scott. So yeah, I was talking about that, and I'm going to give you guys some information you all can look up at where people have criticized this. There have been a lot of comments even about Jesse Jackson. You saw him in the clip. We have talked about it. I'm sure you have seen Brother Stokely, Dick Gregory, and I was about to say Steve Coakley. Excuse me, I said Stokely. Steve Coakley. Their analysis on the King assassination, and Steve Coakley, he had made it his mission to talk. To point out Jesse Jackson's role in alleged role. I say alleged for legal purposes and obvious reasons in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. A lot of people have speculated that. I don't know how true exactly that is, but I do research, and I always thought Jesse may be an opportunist. I've met him before. Actually, he came to New Orleans during when the voting rights campaign was going on back in 2006, the right to vote, because many people were separated from their homes in New Orleans. There was a diaspora. I was living in Baton Rouge, so I've had to drive back and forth to go to vote. I didn't do mail-in ballots or anything like that. And I remember it was a big race for mayor. And Jesse Jackson came down to the Lower Ninth Ward, and I took a picture with him. My picture's on MySpace, if I can ever log into my MySpace. I went to a predominantly black school, and we were given the option to go to school the next day or staying home. I decided to go to school in honor of Martin Luther King. Everyone in my family was devastated, and neighborhood was devastated. People were crying while others took to the streets in protest. Yeah. I mean, look, riots broke out. Remember, Boston was lit up. They got James Brown to do a concert the next night to try and squash the riots. You know, I notice when all of these things go down, when we lose someone like a Martin Luther King, or even when we look at the deaths of the black men in police custody, when stuff gets real, they always send somebody out to squash it. That's not a slight against James Brown and his legacy, but I noticed that that is a pattern when people want to get action and do things when they're upset, and they have a right to be. They always send someone out to cool them off. Like I always thought and have thought that, you know, and we're talking about Jesse Jackson, but I think even worse than, than Jesse, Al Sharpton. Brother Ron, shout out to Ron Hurd. He calls him the cooler because when you're on a hot streak in a casino, they send out a cooler, which is a movie that starred William H. Macy and Alec Baldwin, to stop the hot streak, to stop the winners from bleeding the casino. And you know the old saying, the house always wins. And Sharpton, I think he's a charlatan. But yeah, a lot of people remember where they were when Dr. King was assassinated. I'm going to play some clips for you. Let me say this also. You can go look at these books tonight. You can check out. This is one I have. I have one by William Pepper. It's called. Now, Pepper wrote Orders to Kill. He also wrote The Plot to Kill King. But he had a book called An Act of State. And this was the book that I had from Pepper. And in that book, he details the plot to kill Dr. King. Now, he and Judge Joe Brown, well, Judge Joe Brown has called William Pepper out and said he's a bullshit artist because most of the stuff he says, and I remember this, William Pepper got exposed on, I believe it was 2020 or Nightline, when he implicated some people in the assassination, stating that one of the guys was dead, and then they found out that they were alive. He got caught doing that, and I think the whole thing was a setup. But this is a good book to read nonetheless. An Act of State. Do not get this book by Gerald Posner, Killing the Dream. Gerald Posner is, I haven't even read his book, but I know Posner is the one who they got to even support the single bullet theory with John F. Kennedy. But this is the updated version of the book. You see, that's Dr. King. That's Coretta Scott King. She endorsed this book back in the early late 90s, I should say, in 1999. They had a trial in Memphis, a civil trial, where they found that the United States government, along with members of the mafia, members of the Central Intelligence Agency, J. Edgar Hoover, as well as several other officials in the police department and black co-conspirators were involved in the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King. There were black people involved, whether you guys want to admit that or not. And one who I think really was involved was your Reverend Billy Kyles. And Dick Gregory caught him slipping at one time, and he recorded this video. Well, he didn't record the actual video, but he actually, that's not my title, but this is a presentation Dick did back in, I want to say this has to be in the late 90s. This has to be in 1999. And I want you guys to pay attention very carefully to what this man says.
Is the man who came by to get King to take him to dinner. And 30 years later at a press conference, he slipped because God do baffle your mind sometimes. You look.
Some of the activities are geared especially for the young who did not have a chance to get the feel or to know what the civil rights movement actually was about. Even as they marched, now they could have stopped in a hotel, but when you think about marching from Memphis to Jackson or Jackson to Memphis, that was a hotel. You stayed in churches, you stayed in people's homes, and that's how we got over. That's how we got through. The struggle was a spiritual struggle. You couldn't pay people to do what we had to do. You couldn't pay people to stand before mad dogs and fire hoses and billy clubs and cattle prods. It was strictly a spiritual and moral movement. So we wanted that dimension to be in the pilgrimage to Memphis. We will revisit the mountaintop speech site. That's the Mason's Temple, where Dr. King made his last address, which he almost didn't make, because the night that we were having that rally, there were tornado warnings, and he was behind on the Poor People's Campaign. And he said, you guys go on over and have the rally. I'm going to stay at the motel and work on the Poor People's Campaign. When we got there and Dr. Abernathy walked in and Jesse Jackson walked in and I walked in and others, people started clapping because they thought Martin was behind us. And so Ralph's preacher said to him, this is not our crowd. And he went to the phone and called Dr. King and said, any of the marches that we had in those days, you have an opportunity to bring the children and bring the family and march with us. And when I finished sharing with them the last hour of Dr. King's life, I hurried. But that gave me the wonderful privilege of spending the last hour on earth. 3 preachers in a room, Abernathy, King, and Kyle. And we spent that last hour together in room 306 at the Lorraine Motel. The press is always curious, and writers, what went on? What did you talk about? I said, we just talk preacher talk. What preachers talk about when they get together.
Y'all pay attention to what you're fixing to hear now.
About 5:45, we walked on the balcony.
Let me just clarify too. I don't own the rights to this video. I should have said that earlier. It's being shared for educational purposes only under the Copyright Act of 1976. But this is the part you guys should pay attention to. And this was actually heard at the trial.
And he was talking to people in the courtyard. He stood here and I stood there. Only as I moved away so we could have a clear shot, the shot rang out. Thank you. I turned around and then he stood back on the balcony.
Listen.
Oh.
Wait, listen. Listen. 30 years later, his brother never realized he would slip and say that.
30 years later, Judge Joe Brown too, and you guys can see Judge from obviously right here. Judge Joe even talked about how Billy Kyles was an informant for the Memphis Police Department. He implicated him in this as well. He even had an affidavit from Billy Kyles' wife at the time who stated that they were supposed to go to dinner earlier, and apparently it kept getting pushed back over and over and over again. Dr. King was not even supposed to be staying at that hotel. He was originally staying at, I believe it was Holiday Inn, if I'm not mistaken. I could be wrong on that aspect of it. It was not the Lorraine Motel. It was not the Lorraine Motel he was supposed to be staying in. An FBI call went out on the radio stating, well, I say FBI, but a call went out on the radio stating, what is this black man who was supposed to be so pro-black doing staying at a all-white motel? And so they put Dr. King at the Lorraine Motel. He wasn't supposed to be staying in the bottom bunk. He was bottom hotel rooms. He was supposed to actually be staying at the top. Now, Hosea Williams, the late Hosea Williams, grandfather to Portia Williams from Love and Hip Hop. I'm sorry, Real Housewives of Atlanta. You guys know what I'm talking about. He gave a interesting talk about what happened on that day. He was an eyewitness. Mr. Williams is no longer with us, but his words still ring true to this day.
We were discussing the Washington movement, Poor People Campaign in Washington. And that afternoon, we were in the meeting, and someone said, Reverend Billy Cowles is outside, and he's upset. Dr. King said, oh my God, I forgot to tell you, I promised his wife, who's supposed to be a great soul food cooker, we'd have our feet on her table at 5:30. Now it's 5:45, and we still in the meeting. Dr. King said, everybody rush. And get ready in a hurry, let's go. So I ran down and got to my room. My key wouldn't open my door for some strange reason. The limousine that had been loaned to us, I opened my door, I could touch the limousine. And finally I heard the driver tell Dr. King, Dr. King, I advise you get your top coat, because even though I have the car on, it's still chilly. And the last words he said in this world, okay, Jonesy, I'll get my top coat. And I heard this thing say, pow! And I honestly thought someone had thrown a firecracker into the air. And I looked around to rebuke whoever was that stupid. And I heard something, bloop, fell up above my head. And I looked up, and his leg was sticking through the rail. Dr. King only wore one type of sock and one type of shoe. And I knew that was him. I said, oh my God, they got it. And then I had to run about 50 feet down and back up, and I got to him. And Ralph was holding his head, and Andy was there. And a guy from Africa who had been traveling with us as a newsman from Africa. We found out later on he was working for the CIA. No, the FBI, working for the FBI. And he'd taken a lot of pictures of Dr. King. And I grabbed him in the throat and started choking him, because the bullet hit Dr. King right here. And it went round and cut his medulla oblongata. And I didn't want people to remember Dr. King would have his face shut off. So Andy ran and got a towel. And somehow or another, they took one more picture after I made him enter that camera. And it shows Dr. King down with a towel on his face. But I'm going to tell you, I was an expert gunner in World War II. When I ran up on that balcony, and I looked from whence that bullet had to come, the distance of that bullet, and just could feel the wind blowing that day, I said, whoever shot that rifle was one of the best in the world. He shot one bullet. And I believe that Dr. King hadn't moved to go back and get his top coat, the bullet would have hit him between the eyes. The bullet hit him right here. But what happened, and then Ralph said, we'll go in and take him over to the hospital. Jose, you get all the staff together. 3 of us saw it, Dr. King, after he was shot. 3 SLC executive staff members. Andy, Abernathy, and Hosea Williams. Those are the 3 that saw that body. Now listen to that. So I got in the yard, and I was about to lose my crew, because I was thinking if I could take some molecules out there and make me some guns and kill me some white folks. And one man said, now be cool. You're doing the same thing you promised me you'll never do. And I started crying, and then I heard Jesse Jackson say, he told me, Jesse, take our people onto the mountaintop. And that didn't bother me, even though I know Jesse got nowhere near him. And then Jesse said, I held his head in my hand while he died. And that didn't get to me. And then Jesse said, look at my shirt. And I looked around, sure enough, and Jesse Jackson's shirt was drenched in blood. And I realized the only way Jesse could have gotten that blood was stoop down on that floor at the Lorraine Motel and raked that blood off that floor and put that blood on it. And I went crazy. I really tried to kill Jesse. They grabbed us and all that, but that hurt me so bad. The other thing was, when Abernathy came back, says, no need of prayer, no need of cry, no need of nothing. He is gone. It's over with. He's gone to glory. And we called the meeting, the staff meeting, and Jesse claimed to have been ill. And Abernathy told him, Jesse, go ahead to the room and relax. Jesse had to have run like hell that room into that airport because he got out of Memphis to Chicago. All us feeling, everybody was still in the motel. Cut the televisions on the next morning. That was Jesse Jackson in Chicago with that same bloody shirt on, telling that same lie. I've never respected Jesse since that moment. When they shot Dr. King, a black guy come running around that corner saying, he went that way, he went that way. James Earl Ray no more killed Dr. King, and I killed him. And everybody knew it. He was a patsy set up. And the guy said, went that way, went that way. I said, who went that way? He said, man ran out that building and dropped the rifle on the sidewalk and jumped in a white Mustang, had a red Alabama tag and took off. Well, hell, I wasn't worried. That's no car that ever looked like a Mustang, but a Mustang, a white red Alabama tag. Where's he going? The police have him like that. And I asked that rifle was left on that sidewalk. That was the rifle that James Earl Ray had purchased, but that was Dr. Bullet that killed Dr. King.
Very interesting stuff. Very powerful stuff from Beyond the Grave. Hosea Williams speaks. So I didn't know anything about that. Now, when I speak to Judge Joe has been an ardent defender. He has stated emphatically that Jesse Jackson had nothing to do with Dr. King's assassination. But when you listen to Hosea, and Hosea does not specifically state that he did, he does hint that Jesse certainly lied or was an opportunist about this. Now, Jesse Jackson is almost 80 years old. He's past his prime. He's sickly. He's suffering from Parkinson's disease. And they wouldn't reopen, I think, any case like this, because if they did, they would have to go and get a whole bunch of accessories before the facts that were involved in this thing, if that were true. For instance, I want you to take a look at this. We're doing some homework tonight, guys. You guys look at, from the MLK Lorraine Motel, this image. You all are familiar with this one. This is the photo where Jesse Jackson, Andy Young, I believe that's Ralph Abernathy there. I don't know who the girl is here, if that's the cleaning lady, but you see the cleaning cart here. You know that, and Steve Coakley pointed this out, it was odd that someone would be out cleaning motels at 6 o'clock in the evening. And that's Dr. King on the ground. But I want you to look at this gentleman right here. That gentleman is Merrill McCullough. And Merrill McCullough, we learn he has a very interesting story. Merrill McCullough is, or was, an informant. He was a member of a group called the Invaders. The Invaders were this radical black group that was staying at the Lorraine Motel. Supposedly, if I'm not mistaken, they were there giving him security. And I believe it was Jesse Jackson that removed them from that building, from the hotel, because when it was time for checkout, I believe they came to the SCLC saying that you were going to pay for their rooms, and they said, hell no, we ain't paying for their rooms, and they cleaned them out. Now, they have been saying all of this. Now, I go here, but this is from The Guardian. Merrill McCullough, he was an undercover police officer. This is from 2008, April 4th, 2008. He was an undercover police officer who had infiltrated King's Circle, and according to Time magazine, he worked for the Central Intelligence Agency as far back as 1974. They even talk about here the rise of the Black Messiah, J. Edgar Hoover putting out a memo stating the purpose of this new counterintelligence endeavor, aka COINTELPRO, is to expose, disrupt, misdirect, discredit, or otherwise neutralize the activities of Black nationalist hate-type organizations and groupings, their leadership, spokesmen, membership, and supporters. By hate organizations, Hoover explained that he meant such groups as SNCC, Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, Southern Christianship Leadership Conference, the Congress of Racial Equality, and the Nation of Islam, the group Malcolm X belonged to until shortly before his 1965 murder. In 1968, there was a massive demonstration in support of then in prison leader of the Black Panthers, and Stokely Carmichael, and H. Rap Brown merged SNCC with the Panthers. Hoover issued another directive: prevent the rise of a Messiah who could unify and electrify the militant Black nationalist movement. Malcolm X might have been such a Messiah. Martin Luther King, Stokely Carmichael, and Nation of Islam leader Elijah Muhammad all aspire to this position. King could be a very real contender for this position should he abandon his supposed obedience to white liberal doctrines. According to another declassified FBI memo shortly afterward, the FBI proposed having a carbon copy of an informant report reportedly written by Carmichael to the CIA, carefully deposited in the automobile of a close Black nationalist friend. It is hoped that when the informant report is read, it will help promote distrust between Carmichael and the Black community. FBI agents called Carmichael's mother, falsely telling her that the Black Panthers were out to kill her son. And soon after, Carmichael left the country. That's correct. Stokely Carmichael fled to Ghana, if I'm not mistaken. He became Kwame Ture. The FBI did this. They talk about Malcolm X in particular and how his bodyguard, his bodyguard, of course, Eugene Roberts, was an undercover police agent. We also know about the new quote-unquote confession that was released back on Malcolm's anniversary of his assassination, February 21st, 2021. They also talk about Fred. Panthers bodyguards had a habit of not doing a very good job. The 21-year-old leader of the Panthers Chicago chapter, Fred Hampton, was murdered by Chicago police after they raided his home at 4:45 the morning of December 4th, 1969. They fired 100 rounds into the building, most directed toward Hampton's bedroom. Hampton's personal bodyguard, William O'Neill, had drawn a plan of the house for the authorities. It is felt, an FBI agent wrote to Hoover after the killing, that this information is of considerable value in consideration of a special payment for informant requested in Ray's Chicago letter. O'Neill was paid $300 by the FBI after the Hampton murder, and in 1982, the city of Chicago paid the families of the survivors of the raid and its two victims $1.85 million, which is not $1.8 million. So it's $1.8 million. Not a lot of money. So they talk about Merrill McCullough. And Merrill McCullough is in this infamous photograph that you see here. it wasn't, the government did sanction the murders, Rosalind, you're right. The FBI, the Central Intelligence Agency, if you look at Get Pepper's book, he details how Richard Helms of the CIA was involved. J. Edgar Hoover of the FBI. We know about that just because I'm reading the memo to you all. But Dr. King had a lot of snitches around him. So you can't just say Jesse Jackson. Ernest Withers, he's the man that was Dr. King's personal photographer. He was also the photographer for that took the pictures of Emmett Till's body. It came out that he was an FBI informant. It was also another FBI agent or informant that was with Dr. King. Hosea just mentioned him. Trying to get his name, excuse me. It's not Ernest Withers. It wasn't just Ernest Withers. I can't. You guys might know his name. It's not Ernie Withers that I'm looking for. Ashton says people are still spreading that misinformation about him being killed in the hospital. Well, I have heard that Dr. King survived being shot in the hospital, but he was smothered to death. And supposedly Bill Pepper, in his latest book, The Plot to Kill King, an updated version of An Act of State, he details that. It could be, but Dr. King, I think, would not have survived the shooting based off the wound where the bullet landed and hit. Obviously, hit him in his cheek, knocking out his wisdom teeth, going through his body, clipping his carotid artery, going under his shoulder blade with a high-powered rifle. It would have been very unlikely for him to survive that. Even if he was standing next to an emergency room, he likely would not have survived that shooting. Nevertheless, even if he did breathe and his breathing, let's say, when you breathe, there's obviously voluntary and involuntary. And, when John F. Kennedy was assassinated, even though he was dead, they said that he was shot point blank in his head. He was shot in his temple. His breathing was basically an automatic breathing, like gasping for air. It wasn't controlled. So Dr. King was almost assassinated in 1958. He was stabbed to death. Let's not forget also, Dr. King's parents were also targeted. His mother was assassinated. His mother was shot at in church. His dad as well. Martin Luther King Sr. died in 1984, Daddy King. And his mother, Alberta Williams King, this is Dr. King's mother. Hold on. His brother, AD. Yeah, I hear about that a lot, like AD drowning in a pool. And AD was supposedly an excellent swimmer. That's Dr. King's mom. She was actually shot and killed in church 6 years after Dr. King's assassination by Marcus Wayne Chenault. And it says here, this is interesting, that Chenault's mentor, Reverend Hanania E. Israel of Cincinnati, castigated Black civil rights activists and Black church leaders as being evil and deceptive, but claimed in interviews not to have advocated violence. Chenault did not draw any such distinction and actually first decided he was going to take out Reverend Jesse Jackson in Chicago, but then canceled the plan. So 2 weeks later, he set out for Atlanta, and he shot Alberta King with 2 handguns as she sat at the organ of the Ebenezer Baptist Church. Chenault said that he shot King because all Christians are my enemies, and claimed that he decided that Black ministers were a menace to Black people. Now, he says here that this is interesting. He says he wanted to even kill Dr. King Sr., but he decided to shoot Mrs. King because she was near him. Huh? He killed one of the church deacons, Edward Boykin, and Mrs. Jimmy Mitchell, a retired school teacher. She suffered a wound to the neck, so she survived. And Dr. King's daughter stated that it seemed like I was watching a scene from a bad movie play out. I don't get that. That sounds funny to you? That sounds funny to me. That doesn't sound like, so you have an opportunity to kill your target. You decided against killing that target and then pick another target, but then you decided even the target that where you're saying Black ministers are the worst, you chose not to take out that target. Makes no sense. And this guy died in his 40s from a stroke. That's Dr. King's brother, looks just like him. Alveda King, who you see on, she's the Republican that you have seen on. And look, man, a lot of these relatives, I mean, I'm not going to say because somebody disagrees with me politically that they're coons or sellouts, but, you know, I've noticed a lot of these family members of these civil rights activists, they are not on code at all. Dr. King's children right now are fighting over his property still, his Bibles that are in the King Museum out in Atlanta. They support Justin Bieber. This is AD. And, you know, he was killed just less than a year after Martin's death from a, quote, accidental drowning. It's widely believed, you know, Dick Gregory has even told me that he was killed in a conspiracy because they went after him. It very well could be the case. I don't put anything past the devil. Yeah, Alveda is the only surviving child of, you know, that's Alveda King right there. She's the one you see on Fox News all the time. She has 6 children. She's conservative. She's an anti-abortion activist. She's a novelist as well. She's worked with King. I mean, look, I don't have anything against people that I have nothing against people necessarily because they are conservative. Because there are things I'm conservative about. There are things I'm even liberal about. But I don't support people that just, if you are a person that's just going along to get along because you want a job, I got a problem with that. So AD's son died. So she's the only surviving child of AD King. So you're tying that into what happened with Dr. King. You know, there's a ton of information too, guys. You should look up. This is, of course, this guy here. That's Lloyd Jowers. Now, remember what I was telling you about the conspiracy to kill Dr. King? He went on primetime with Sam Donaldson in the early 90s, primetime live, and told details that there was an alleged conspiracy in order to kill Dr. King with members of the United States government and the Memphis Mafia. And his restaurant was Jim's Bar and Grill, which was right next to or adjacent to the Lorraine Motel in Memphis. He stated that a mafia kingpin named Frank Liberto paid him $100,000 to arrange the assassination. He says he did not name the person he claimed to have hired, but said it was not Ray. Said it was not James L. Ray. Now, in 1998, the King family filed a wrongful death suit. And just so you guys know, with a wrongful death suit, you have obviously a different burden of proof. Yes, she's been on Fox News. I don't think she's a contributor there, Rosalind. Your burden of proof obviously is different from what you have in your criminal court. You already know about OJ. You know, you can be found not guilty, but you can also be found civilly liable for that. And they hired William Pepper. Now, Pepper actually was James Earl Ray's lawyer. And it's interesting, they actually have footage that was recently released sometime, I want to say, not too long ago, where James Earl Ray was arrested. Trying to flee. This was 7 years ago. Let me see if I can play that right quick before we get back to Lloyd Jowers. Hold on. How'd they get this footage?
Be held for the county of Shelby at the courthouse in Memphis. Dan has apprehended the state of Tennessee on a bill of indictment against him for murder in the first degree. Aaron fell not Dan and notice with the state indictment murder was set forth at August 1967.
I can't even hear it, but he's basically reading his rights to James Earl Ray, his rights right now.
One, you have the right to remain silent. Number two, anything you say is against the court of law. Number three, you have the right to have a lawyer. Your own choice.
All right, so that was that. Now, you talked about how Dr. King changed, the radical king. I remember when I had a book, and this was before Michael Eric Dyson was going on his full coon rant with Bill Cosby and obviously being a troll for the Democratic Party. Like, I lost a lot of respect for Michael Eric Dyson, but Dyson could write a book. I give him credit where credit's due. I met him, and he was a real cool dude. I just don't like what he has been doing lately. But he wrote a couple of books called I May Not Get There With You, and that was a speech that was based off of the mountaintop speech that Dr. King gave. I've also seen, and y'all could actually look at, Ashton, that is actual footage. I don't know what it is, but it is mine. You guys, when you are looking at the live stream, you're responding late. I don't know if there's a delay or how long it is, but let me show you all something right quick. This is, yes, Dr. King has met with the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. This is another picture I have here with Dr. King. Let me put this up though. I got to share this because you talk about the radical king, Bishop. Let me show you all this speech that Dr. King did, where Dr. King actually supported reparations. That's right. You guys can take a look at it because Dr. King was changing. At some point he was actually talking like Malcolm X, as some people would say, but both radical. But this is what Dr. King had to say on the issue of reparations.
At the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of the very same time that America refused to give the Negro any land, through an act of Congress, our government was giving away millions of acres of land in the West and the Midwest, which meant that it was willing to undergird its white peasants from Europe with an economic floor. But not only did they give the land, they built land-grant colleges with government money to teach them how to farm. Not only that, they provided county agents to further their expertise in farming. Not only that, they provided low interest rates in order that they could mechanize their farms. Not only that, today, many of these people are receiving millions of dollars in federal subsidies not to farm, and they are the very people telling the black man that he ought to lift himself by his own bootstraps. And this is what we are faced with. And this is a reality. Now, when we come to Washington, in this campaign, we are coming to get our check.
All right, y'all. I don't know if y'all can hear that in the back. That's my people. I have people here for the Easter holiday, but happy Easter, by the way. I forgot to tell y'all that too. But yeah, so Dr. King was talking about reparations, and this is something that many people forget when we're talking about Dr. King and his legacy. All right. Sorry about that, guys. So that's we're talking about the radical Dr. King, which is what they always forget to talk about. But now let me also show you all. Let's go back to Mr. Jowers for a second. I want to go back to him. Yeah, as soon as he was talking about economic empowerment is when they killed Dr. King. You see, they didn't kill Dr. King because of some civil rights stuff. A lot of people make that mistake. Dr. King wasn't killed because of that. He was killed because he got to the point where he was talking about determining foreign policy and also talking about economic empowerment. He was doing a poor people's campaign. Now, I told you all to ignore anything that the little mouse boy here, Gerald Posner, puts out, because my opinion, this is just my opinion, I don't know about it being true or not, but Posner basically is the one that they pay to put out that will defend the government at any and all costs. That's Gerald Posner. And he came at brother Steve Coakley. He came at people with the Oliver Stone and the JFK assassination. He is known to try and discredit things. When he was talking about, and referring to Steve Coakley, was talking about, he was talking about Dr. King and Billy Kyles, and how Billy Kyles was involved in Dr. King's assassination, accusing Billy Kyles of being a Memphis police informant. He stated that Posner, in his book, Killing the Dream, said that it was wrong for Coakley to try and accuse Billy Kyles, Reverend Kyles, of being an FBI agent. The only problem is that, and you can go look this online, because Coakley did a 2-hour, along with Dick Gregory, it's about an hour and 54 minutes, nearly 2 hours talks that they both did on Dr. King's assassination, where they explained why this didn't apply, explaining the assassination. They stated, I didn't accuse Billy Kyles of being an FBI agent. I accused him of being a Memphis police informant. There's a difference. There's a difference. So, Lord. You all who don't know who Steve Coakley is, most of you do. This is Steve Coakley here. He passed away in 2012. But you guys, I'm not going to play the whole clip, but he was going in on Jesse Jackson and his supposed the assassination.
For the record, page 464.
But he talks about Billy Kyles.
When the establishment turned on Jackson, he came to Williams. In 1977, Senator Hubert Humphrey had seen a piece on 60 Minutes describing Jackson's attempts to motivate inner city youth to get an education. Humphrey urged HEW.
Something that Brother Ron told me that is interesting is that with Jesse, I just want to go back to this, that Rainbow Push Coalition initially, that was started by Fred Hampton. If you look at it, Fred Hampton in Chicago, because that's where Jesse is from, Rainbow Coalition, Fred was the one that started all of that. He started that. That was not started by Jesse. That was in 1969. The Dr. King that they want to show you, I'm just looking at the comments. I'll get to that in a second because I'm about to get off the air. But it was but this is it here, April 4th, 1969. You remember, Fred is killed that same year in December. It was a multicultural movement founded April 4th, 1969. That's 52 years today in Chicago, Illinois, by Fred Hampton, along with William Preacher Man Fesperin of the Young Patriots Organization and Hosea Chacha Jimenez, founder of the Young Lords. It was the first of several 20th century Black-led organizations to use the Rainbow Coalition concept. So, excuse me, what you saw in the movie Black Panther, Judas and the Black Messiah, was true. And Fred Hampton was doing all of these things to push forward the Black agenda, to push forward a multicultural movement. And he was aligning with those, and so with others from different organizations and different groups. And so J. Edgar Hoover noticed this. Hoover sees this. And when Hoover sees this, he makes a decision that in order to prevent the rise of the Black Messiah, even though this nigga, this is what they thought of Fred Hampton, is going to jail, something needs to be done. If I send him to jail, he'll just be a martyr. He needs to be neutralized. He's got to go. And so a decision is made. The only thing is that Fred wasn't the first to go. They know about the Radical King. They know about this footage that we saw earlier where Dr. King was talking about reparations. They just don't want to focus on that. They take our leaders. They take our leaders and they water them down. They water them down. But I want you all, as we close out here, to look at these books. You should look online too on YouTube. You should check out Dick Gregory and Mark Lane. Dick Gregory and Mark Lane wrote a book called Codename Zorro. That was Dr. King's actual FBI code name, Zorro. You should look at books if you can find it, look up that book, look at Pepper's book. You should also look at interviews that Brother Ron Hurd has done with Judge Joe Brown. You all know Judge Joe Brown and Valerie Denise Jones show. Shout out to them. Every Friday at 4:00 p.m., Valerie Denise Jones produces the Judge Joe Brown show. You guys should Google and check that out to go to her platform and support the platform continuously. I'm a contributor to that show, as is Bishop. But this is the book you should read, Codename Zorro, if you can find it. It might be out of print. Well, no, it's not out of print, but this was written by, it's a hardcover. This was written by Mark Lane, and Dick Gregory. Mark Lane actually wrote a book called Rush to Judgment, which was on the Kennedy assassination, detailing Lee Harvey Oswald. You should also check out let's see, Rush to Judgment is good, but also Assassination by Jim D. Eugenio. I actually got that book. This was it. I told you about this before, the Assassinations. This is a great book to have. It just details not only Dr. King's assassination, but also JFK, Malcolm X, and RFK. Very good books to read. You could also check out the FBI's Long War against Tupac Shakur and Black America. And other Black celebrities. It's called The War on Tupac Shakur and Black Leaders. U.S. intelligence murderous targeting of Tupac, Malcolm, MLK, Malcolm, Panthers, Hendrix, as in Jimi Hendrix, Bob Marley, rappers, and linked ethnic leftists. It's available on Kindle. That's a good book to read. But check out, certainly check out the, I'm going to stop this here, but you can look at the murder of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. online here that is on YouTube that you all could check out and see. What else we have here? There's another documentary. There's a bunch of them online, guys, that you could find. But you know, Dr. King's death still resonates. You know, the impact of it. And my dad, you know, told me where he was as a kid, how people were upset and sad, obviously, over what happened. I don't know if we will ever find out. I mean, we found out the truth. I mean, the truth will come out eventually, although whether we get justice or not, that's another thing. But certainly,
good evening. The Reverend.
We will, we miss Dr. King. This is somebody we have a national holiday for. He is somebody that is greatly missed. And truth be told, I don't think that we have truly, especially Black America, has truly recovered from what has happened. And don't let people fool you. This is another important thing before I get off the air. Do not let those fool you that try to use Dr. King, just like when we talk about the I Have a Dream, where they always just sanitized Dr. King down to I have a dream, I have a dream. Dr. King was more than that. He was not just about having a dream. He was also about action. He did things for people. He changed. He was radical. Jesus Christ was radical. We celebrate Easter today. Remember, Christ whipped and threw out the priests and servants and the merchants in his father's temple when they were selling gold and coins. And he said, "You turned my father's house into a den of thieves." Dr. King changed. This was Tom Farrell. He was an ABC anchor when Dr. King was assassinated.
Nobel Peace Prize winner and the leader of the nonviolent civil rights movement in the United States was assassinated in Memphis tonight. A sniper's bullet cut down Dr. King as he stood on a hotel balcony in Memphis. Within an hour, Dr. King was dead. That happened at 7 p.m. Eastern Time. The nation was shocked. President Johnson expressed horror and then postponed his trip to Hawaii until tomorrow. We're going to go to Memphis now and talk to ABC's Tom Gerald, who is on the scene.
Tom Gerald. I don't know who this is.
Here in Memphis, of course, a great deal of shock, a great deal of confusion, and a great deal of some violence. I can't say a great deal because I don't really know. I do know that police are very concerned, that the fire department is moving units around the streets, and that there is some rock throwing and some fires reported and some...
I'm not going to keep playing that, but look, people that want to use Dr. King's name, we got to control, like I said, our own legacy, our own leaders, our own... we have to have our own platform because too many people like to use Dr. King for their own advantage. We're talking about civil rights. I talk about this all the time. And they use our struggle and fight to push their own agenda. And yet when you need them the most, they are not there. Ashton, you said Jesse didn't create the African-American term. I'd always heard he did. He was responsible for that. Myself. You know, I don't know where it came from, but I had heard it was him. But, you know, nevertheless, let me turn it off him. But I'm going to leave on a note a very positive note on Dr. King again. We got to control the narrative. When he talks about we're coming for our check, that's one of the things he did mention in his I Have a Dream speech that people forget. But y'all follow We All Be News, Ron Hurd. Shout out to him, Judge Joe Brown, Bishop Scott. And also, I got to say happy belated birthday to the Queen, Miss Nicole Lewis. I hope you had a blessed one. She said she enjoyed it. She was obviously having a good time today. I checked out her live stream later that had dropped. But I see we don't have a lot of people. I guess everybody's tuned into the Isley Brothers versus Earth, Wind, and Fire right now, or not Professor Black True, but Jason Black show. But you guys have a blessed Easter, and I will see you all in the next one. But don't let them take away Dr. King's legacy from you. Dr. King, yes, cared about the whole human race, but make no mistake about it, Dr. King was about Black people, because it was Black people who were suffering in this country, and he was a Black man, and he wanted to see his people go further. And other groups of people now that are using their agendas to push forward, using our fight and struggle to push forward their agenda, they have another thing coming. People are upset, people are angry, and I want you to be angry. We cannot let this happen. We got to fight. We got to push forward, create our own businesses, create our own financial institutions, more Black banks. Let's do it so that way we can fund our businesses. I'm trying to do that right now. I'm trying to not so much create a Black bank, but I want to create my own business as well. And I have several businesses and opportunities coming up. My single, I got to tell you this too, I have some music things that are coming up that are going to be dropping real soon. So perhaps in the next live stream, I'll have that ready for you all to hear. And that would be great. But April 3rd, this is his speech. I'll leave on this. This was his mountaintop speech, guys. Y'all be safe, be blessed. Also, I ask you to donate to the Cash App. I can't stress that enough, because the more you all support, the more the channel can grow. It's greatly appreciated if you can. Happy Easter to all who celebrated, and I will see you all in the next one. I'll holla. Peace.
All we say to America is be true to what you said on paper. If I lived in China or even Russia or any totalitarian country, maybe I could understand some of these illegal injunctions. Maybe I could understand the denial of certain basic First Amendment privileges, because they haven't committed themselves to that over there. But somewhere I read of the freedom of assembly. Somewhere I read of the freedom of speech. Somewhere I read of the freedom of press. Somewhere I read that the greatness of America is the right to protest far right. So just as I say we aren't going to let any dogs or water hoses turn us around, we aren't going to let any injunction turn us around. Well, I don't know what will happen now. We've got some difficult days ahead. But it really doesn't matter with me now, because I've been to the mountaintop. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place. But I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, But I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. So I'm happy tonight. I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
This is a CBS News special report.
Dan Rather reporting for CBS News from New York. The Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. was shot to death by an assassin late today as he stood on a balcony in Memphis, Tennessee. Dr. King had planned to lead another civil rights march in Memphis next Monday. We got the latest on the story now from Russ Hodge, news director of WREC-TV.
Fear no one. Fear no man. Good night.